and welcome to Civil War Digital Digest. I'm Andy, and today we are having a special episode on location at Gettysburg National Military Park in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Before I get any further, I want to say thank you to our patrons whose financial contributions let us go on the road, go to this hallowed ground, and bring this location to you on video. For as little as a cup of coffee a month, you can be a patron too and make a big difference for us here on the Digest. I'm joined today by author and historian Matt Boyer, who's back with us. We're talking about his new book and one of the soldiers from it. Hi, Matt. How are you doing?
Good, Andy. It's always a pleasure to be here. Today we're going to be talking about one of the guys in the 60th New York Infantry, Fred Winslow.
All right. Well, before we get going, Fred, not Frederick?
Correct. Yes,
Yeah.
It is actually Fred Winslow, which is very interesting. We had to double check that when it came to his records and whatnot, but from what we can tell, it has always been Fred.
Interesting. You think of Victorian times that people were a little bit more formal. It's interesting to have what we consider a nickname as his actual name.
Exactly. And even on the monument itself, because that's what we're standing in front of here. Not the 60th New York's monument, which is up on a little higher up the way there, but this is actually the monument for the skirmish line of the regiment, for Company I's skirmish line. And Fred Winslow is right there.
So, Matt, why does I Company, the skirmish company, get its own monument out here by itself?
Well, it's a great question, Andy. The fact of the matter is the 60th New York, it's part of this defense of Culp's Hill, but they have not only been building their earthworks up here, but they have thrown their skirmishers out in front of the whole line. So these guys are really out here on their own hook and crook. They're going to be some of the first troops from the Federal line to engage the Confederates coming up Culp's Hill, and they wanted to memorialize that.
To me, that would indicate that probably what they're doing out here was they're probably seeing some significant action if they're getting their own monument for what they're doing out here.
They are seeing some significant action. Now, we do have listed on here not only the men who are in the company and fought here, but also some of the casualties. Now, we need to be careful with this monument, too, because right next to Fred's name, it looks like it says killed. He's absolutely not killed. It's actually the gentleman next to him, Townsend, who's cut down. But this company does sustain several casualties. The 60th New York's going to have 11 killed and 41 wounded. So they got hit pretty hard here.
All right. Well, let's talk about Fred himself. Can
Sure.
you give us some background on Fred?
Absolutely. This is his image. Fred Winslow is actually from New York. He is from St. Lawrence, New York. He's going to be a fairly young recruit when he comes in. Now, this particular image is likely taken when he's gone home. He is going to re-up in the December of 1863, actually Christmas Eve. He decides to re-enlist. And much like other veteran regiments, he's going to be allowed to go home. Now, when he goes home, he actually gets married. And there's some speculation that this might be his wedding photo, if you will. He actually does have a ring on, and you can see both of his hands. He is wearing a ring, but it's not in one of those traditional wedding band, or I guess it'd be left hand for today. Fred Winslow is going to continue his service. He is wearing his Corps badge in this image too, so we know it's after 1863, the spring of 63. He is going to survive the war. He's not wounded. He is going to make it through the entire war, and he is going to become a grocer after the war and would actually be heavily involved in the Grand Army of the Republic before finally passing away.
Well, and of course, then that leads me to the question, what is the Grand Army of the Republic for everyone who doesn't know?
Right. The Grand Army of the Republic is the largest and arguably most important veterans organization after the American Civil War for Union veterans. It's going to be incredibly powerful politically. Encouraging its members to vote the way they shot was a famous phrase of the day. But it's also going to advocate for the veterans themselves, a precursor to today's veterans organizations for sure, but also doing some of those things that we might see the Veterans Administration do today.
Well, and it was also the GAR that lobbied for things like this monument right here. They
Right.
lobbied their individual states for that money, correct?
Yep, they did. And in fact, many of the states, including New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, are going to specifically dedicate distinct amounts of money, oftentimes $2,500 to $3,300 for monuments of individual regiments.
All right. Now about the image itself of Fred. You know, I mean, this is special that we have this image of Fred, this little piece of him that we get to bring back to this location.
Absolutely.
The actual ground that he fought on 160 years ago today.
This is part of Joe Stahl's collection, my co-author. Joe's been collecting for decades, has hundreds of CDV images. I've begun the process of collecting as well for other regiments and other engagements. But when it comes to Fred Winslow here, it is something special to bring this image right to where he was fighting, on the grounds that he was actually on.
Can you tell us a little bit about the technical of the photo itself? What kind of image is it? Where was it struck?
A carte de visite, or visiting card is what that means in French. It is a paper image. This is not your tin type or something like that. So this particular one, it actually has listed on the back, Ogdensburg, New York is where this was taken. So likely when, like we were saying, when he was home on furlough.
Certainly. We know when he was in New York and when he would have been in Ogdensburg.
Exactly.
Exactly. For the uniform itself, I know in pre-production we were talking about this. I'm fascinated that he's wearing his dress frock, but it's interesting about his trousers.
Exactly. He is wearing the dark blue trousers of what is generally considered pre-war or early war uniform. And we talk a little bit about this in the book, how that's not a hard and fast rule. Yes, December of 61, the general orders, I think it's 108, comes down saying light blue trousers. We're going to save some money on dyes and things like that. For the volunteer forces, it's going to be light blue trousers, dark blue trim. But a lot of these guys have been issued dark blues and would continue to be issued dark blues throughout the war.
I mean, there's a famous set of photos of soldiers at Appomattox where individual soldiers are still wearing dark blue trousers in April of 1865.
Right, and that's an important image too, because it's not just the officers. One of these misconceptions is that it was the regular Army guys and the officers themselves that were only rocking the dark blues, but we do see the enlisted men even that late in the war with them.
Well, and it leads to a couple things. As we all know with the military, you got to use up the stock of what's there before you convert fully to the new one. The military is going to use what they have, but also I wondered what it speaks to the soldiers if they saw, if this is his wedding photo, if he purposely wanted something that maybe would be considered more formal too.
Right, exactly. I think that's a really good point.
And interestingly too, at this time he would have been a corporal or a sergeant, correct? And he's not wearing any chevrons in the image itself.
No, nor does he have the piping on the slacks either, or the trousers. So it is an interesting choice that he's made for this image, and we don't really know why he doesn't have his chevrons, but it's a good observation because you're right, he would have been a sergeant by this point.
And what was he mustered out as?
He would muster out as a sergeant.
So the fighting here at Gettysburg, the skirmish line of I Company in 60th New York, what exactly are they coming up against? Who's attacking this position?
Johnson's division. So Confederate forces are coming right up the hill at us, and it's going to be George Greene's brigade that is basically holding off this entire Confederate division for most of the day, or I should say the second half of the day on July 2nd, because there's not a lot of action up here initially. It's going to be this mid-afternoon. They start building the breastworks and things of that nature, and then the majority of the 12th Corps is pulled away.
They've got to go meet the crisis on the left,
Exactly.
Right?
Now, by the time they get down there, the crisis has basically been averted. They're going to come under some artillery fire and not really be significantly engaged. But then they've got to come back again. And that whole time, Greene with the 60th has been up here just duking it out with the Confederate infantry coming up the rise.
When I can imagine, too, with Greene's brigade holding the line, the skirmish line takes on a whole new importance of keeping the Confederates back because they don't want them to see how thin that main line up there is.
That's a really good point. And that may have been part of the strategy as well. Absolutely. Engage them there, force them to slow down or stop down there so that they can't see the rest of the line.
What's the rest of the war look like for the 60th?
Well, they're 12th Corps, so you know what that means. They're heading out west. In September of 1863, they're going to be shifted out west with the 11th Corps. By the spring of 64, these two corps have been merged together to become the 20th Corps. And they will serve through the rest of the war. So the Atlanta campaign, the Savannah campaign, and of course the Carolinas. Now, they will muster out in Alexandria in 1865, so they get to come up and be part of the Grand Review. And then our guy, Fred Winslow, he will actually head west after the war, and he's going to wind up in Janesville, Wisconsin, and that's where he becomes that grocer we were talking about.
Well, thank you, Matt, for this discussion. you know, again, getting to have the original photo to bring Fred here where he
Absolutely.
fought at this very important engagement in American history is a special thing. I want to say thank you to Gettysburg National Military Park for letting us be on location here on Culp's Hill. It's always a special experience to get to be on the actual ground and share a story like Fred's with you. For Civil War Digital Digest, I'm Andy. We'll catch you next time.